Hmm. There's a certain kind of hush that falls over a room while waiting for the technology. I'm sure that the people who set up the technology do not feel it at all. Yes, excellent. One more check. Check 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. Is everything okay? Everything is okay. Excellent. Now, do we wait until 7:05 and let people chat and talk, which is kind of the way artsy events start? Right. So let's, now that we know the sound is working, please let's just chat and talk for a few minutes. 7:05 will come back around and I'll start with the Well, no sooner does he say, talk amongst yourselves, and he says, please stop talking and listen to me. But, well, here we are at the Oakwood. Can you not hear? Okay. I guess then we'll have to speak louder. Is that this mic only going to the remote and not going to here? So there's no mic and sound speaker over there. I'll try to project, and I guess readers will need to project, or maybe we can get people closer if they're having a hard time hearing, which could be easier also. There are a couple of seats right up there. Welcome everyone. I'm Steve Wingate, Associate Professor of English at South Dakota State University Department of English and Interdisciplinary Studies. It's a mouthful now. And since 1975, with a few breaks, we have been producing Oakwood, which is an annual literary magazine. And for the longest time, we were a predominantly student magazine. And the Student Association started feeling like maybe this wasn't representing enough students and started pulling back our funding to the point where they actually stopped funding us. So that was an opportunity to say, well, maybe we shouldn't do Oakwood anymore. But it was also an opportunity to say, maybe we should make Oakwood into something different. That is not just about students and SDSU, but actually is about something bigger with SDSU English at the center. And that's over the past few years is what we've been trying to do, incorporate voices from outside the SDSU community, although still keeping our core in the SDSU community. So in this issue, you'll find some pretty heavy hitters if you know the literary community of the Northern Great Plains. Our territory now is essentially South Dakota and the states that adjoin it. And I won't bother you, or I won't bore you with reading the editor's intro or publisher's note, but that gives you a sense of what it is that we're trying to do here in terms of the regionality of the publication as we move forward. So a lot more people from outside of South Dakota, more people who used to live here and have gone away, or who have grew up somewhere else and settled here. Because my fundamental idea is that there's two types of regionalism. One is, well, it's just us people who are from the region, and we're going to talk about the region. And then there's this expanded sense of regionalism, which says the life of the region includes not just people who were born there, but people who have come through, or people who were born there and left. So it's that expanded sense of regionalism that I'm working with on Oakwood. I want to thank a bunch of people here. Well, first of all, Dr. Jason McAtee over there, Department Head of English and Interdisciplinary Studies, for his continuous support of Oakwood as it has made this transition. We also have our student editors here now. I do some editing. I solicit work from authors, but the students pull in the unsolicited work and pick the gems out of it. And they picked out many gems. Would you please stand? Austin Buckholtz, Elena Steckelberg, and Gina Gilbert. There we are. Oh, yeah. So excellent job on that. And if you like the look, Gina also did the layout on that. So thank you very much. Fun times. And also, we had to use a whole new file management system, and it was wacky. It was a wacky year. But it worked, and it was very good stuff. We have a bunch of readers. We have, I think, 8. Let's see if I can test my math skills. 2, 4, 6, 7 now. Readers who are from the region, from essentially locals, who I want to introduce. And then we have some virtuals. Hello, virtuals, who are going to come in later on. I don't know how many other people are out there listening. I hope there are a few. It would be really, really wonderful if we can get a few from outside this community as we attempt to build this journal. I do want to read one thing. We, thanks to Chuck Woodard, Professor Emeritus here in English, I managed to get in touch with Ted Kuser, who is a 2-time U.S. Poet Laureate, and said, hey, I'm trying to do this thing with Oakwood. You got anything for us? Can you send us a poem? So he sent us a poem. If I'm breaking the law by reading it, just somebody tell me. It's called Tumbleweeds. He's our leadoff batter. It seems they're all males, with the females far out at the end of the wind, not necessarily waiting, but there. The weeds tumbling past us are all overweight, pushy, coarse, shouldering each other out of the way, and those too fat to make it up over the fences aren't offered help, but left behind panting and helpless, while the rest bound along shakily toward a finishing line that retreats and retreats, a wind-driven horizon. So it's nice to have Ted Kuser here, and hopefully that's the beginning of what we're going to be transforming Oakwood into. So I want to introduce people individually, one by one. We have quite a few of our own here, and that's by design. I like to think that we punch above our weight here in this department. We are a small department, but we have a lot of good things going on, and we try to make sure that they all get represented here in Oakwood. Our very first reader is Jody Andrews, who was one of our creative thesis students in our master's program. So we do have a master's program that lets you do creative work for your thesis. And Jody's, you can read her bio, but she had her first chapbook coming out, that was about 2 years ago. Do you have another book coming up? You do. Maybe, perhaps, when you come up, you can tell us a little bit about it if you'd like. Ladies and gentlemen, Jody Andrews.
Hello, everybody. Um, yeah, so my first book, my first full-length book is coming out this year. I don't have a release date yet, but it's called Skin Reverberations. And I've been working on it since 2015 when I took my first poetry class at SDSU. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see that come out. Time to talk quietly, I think. Okay, so my work is on page 18 and 19. The first one I'm going to read is The Iceberg. And this one I wrote on a walk. I think that I write a lot of times when I'm not actually at a computer. I find it harder to do that way. So I vividly remember myself where I was walking, and I kept stopping and writing a few lines on my phone and then doing that. So I'm sure I looked a little silly doing that, but that's how this one came about. So yeah, The Iceberg. We tread the path on this icy island across the sea, grooved from years of the same conversations, scenario hypothesizing. I shiver from the tension. We can only discuss what little ice floats above the water, never mention the arrowhead of ice, hundreds of tons beneath the surface, years of lies. We could swim downward to count them, but our bones would turn to icicles. You wield anything against us, like all these holes in your walls that kept rotting and molding, couldn't have been cleaned out and patched over, like someone else should stretch their hide to cover them. I know you're cold, but you pull emotions out of your quiver like arrows, aiming for our hearts. However, we pull thicker armor over our bodies because we spoke the ghost to each other. We learned to call it abuse. You don't know how thick our chainmail when you call to manipulate. When you pull out a dagger and aim for the breastplate, the chink, and you step back speechless, gripping the dagger harder. The iceberg shifts, a bit more swallowed up in the water. I wrote that one after someone called me and she just said that her mom had been lying to her for her whole life about a lot of things. And she called and she knew that her mom was lying to her as she was on the phone with her. And it was so frustrating because she couldn't say, I know you're lying to me. And so that's what that came from. All right, then this next one is What Metaphors? It is the one, I think I have another one that I'm going to end up writing about the pandemic, but this is the other one. The other one I think is going to be titled Pregnancy During a Pandemic, but this one is the one I wrote before that. The news swirls in black clouds overhead, the skyline already green. What metaphors for an actual virus? How connected we are to each other. How the same air circulates from person to person, house to house, office to office. What metaphor for actual fires, millions of square miles ablaze. Ahmaud Arbery gunned down while jogging, George Floyd suffocated in the streets. What metaphors for job loss and health insurance loss during a pandemic? What metaphors for hospital beds at capacity and people wearing face coverings at the supermarket? This new normal, sealed smiles. What metaphors for mass graves of the unclaimed, for suicide attempts, for moving across the country, jobs lost swiftly over a Zoom call in living rooms, hollow words from hollow throats, hollow as a zero. What metaphors for divorce, for a generation of parents weighing money or safety, safety or money, risk or risk, sending babies to school in masks. In the afternoon, my daughter's milk spills, and I can't find the tomato paste for the pasta already drained. More milk spills. I am swirling in the sky, about to touch down, and I lower her from her high chair. She pushes a football on the floor, and it rolls all lopsided. The calming effect of this small gesture, like a bold ray of sunshine through twisting darkness. I sit down where it landed and push it back.
Thank you, Goody. Next up, a local of a different kind, of a California kind, who's now been here, what, 12 years? 10 years. But part of that program that I have to recognize that many of the people who are shaping the literary world are people who are not from here. Erica Saunders, who is also part of the a very integral part of the South Dakota State Poetry Society, as I recall.
Thank you. And speaking of the South Dakota State Poetry Society, hi everyone, welcome. Jody's book, she didn't say too much about, that's forthcoming, is the first book that'll be published through Past Press, which is a new arm of the South Dakota State Poetry Society. So we're very excited about that. All right, I heard my poem was on page 75, good. And wrote this for my husband's birthday, January. I've been with my husband since I was 18 and instrumental, pushing me to write. And one of the ways he does that is he always asks for my writing as gifts for, different holidays. So I was struggling with I don't know, I can write things too. I don't know what to get him. And I'm like, oh yeah, he always says, write him something. So I wrote him this. One of those fun poems that started one way, I was thinking family. We spent a lot of time as a family together, playing games. And then I thought about video games, and then it went down a whole nother rabbit hole. So Deus Ex Machina, in the machine. Hey, they all slay the dragons, the beasts. Each night robins fly against greed, need, tyranny, and fantasy. America, my America, for I am America, wears the face of Enron, Omicron, Amazon, Exxon's boots and barbed wire stamped across the land, primed and pumped, ready for overflow. I watched and said I must go, but couldn't find my feet to stand, so accustomed to sitting at the machine. Building fantasy worlds where we slay isolation and longing. Groundhog Day should have been filmed in '84 because this is a love song. After all, my love, let's all be the God in the machine. The web unfurls in space to spy on time. All the red and blue pulsing wires shielding us as they are from the sun. It sees red. We all see red. It takes the human eye to translate the image to cooler tones like those of you and me. Who wouldn't want to be the God swinging from the rope? I absolve you, my child. Let's build our fantasy world, mining databases and taking the average to stay away from entropic exhaustion. Lord Calvin would approve. Because this is a love song, my love, the kind of love song where the protagonist grows a heart. Do not fear, for all love is transformative according to Disney. I run my hand up the back of your shirt to feel silken skin against silken skin, even as we're shielded in synthetic cotton. Let the oceans boil and the plastics pop. Do you hear it, my love? The dog is always scratching at the door, never wanting in, always wanting out.
We have fiction writers too, and I'd like to bring one of them up here, Haley Wilson. Now, sometimes we get students who do really, really well, and then they go and get jobs, and then their life happens, and then suddenly they come back and they're like, "Hey, I'm still writing." And Haley was a student of mine way back when. I don't know how far back, but then I ran into her and it's like, "Hey, are you writing?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm actually still writing." And so I got very, very happy that a student was still writing. And actually, she's writing some really good stuff. It's harder with fiction people to get a sense of it because the stories take a long time to read, and we're not going to do all that. But I'd like to bring Haley Wilson up here to read an excerpt from her short story.
Thank you. That was a really, really nice intro. I'm kind of scared to live up to that hype, but thank you. So the job that he mentioned is I work at the SDSU Foundation on campus here, writing about all things SDSU. But in my free time, much of the time, I kind of write some fairly dark fiction, which is what you'll hear tonight. This is just a segment. And this piece is called The Fight or Flight Effect. You'll catch your death. That's what my grandmother used to tell me constantly growing up. When I walked outside without drying my hair properly after a shower, the times I crossed the street without looking both ways, when I'd ride my bike like a convict on the run from the law, wheeling this way and that, often crashing headlong into the bushes lining the sidewalk. June Cassidy, you will catch your death. Such an antiquated saying, and one I don't understand to this day. In my experience, people don't have to catch death. It catches us all on its own. All it takes is one wrong decision, a moment we can't take back, and that's it. Caught. The sun is too bright today. It lurks around the edges of my blinds, sneaking its greedy fingers into the slats and illuminating the dust motes in the air, floating dreamlike and outnumbering me 1,000,000,000 to 1. I stomp forward and plunge the fluffy plume of a Swiffer duster into the cracks, jabbing into the crevices and assaulting the wooden frame. No trace of dust. That leaves just the air. One prod to the thermostat and the air conditioner kicks on, blasting the air with frigid whirring. It drowns out the noise of the yipping Moro children across the street, which suits me fine. Through the gaps in the blinds, I can see the twins, Eli and Ellie Morrow, the two stupidest names their parents could have possibly selected. They're always out there in their yard with the overrun and withered hydrangea bushes, the grass a shade of a yellowed bruise. I imagine it cracks and crinkles underfoot, brittle. Ellie sits in the grass, blowing bubbles with careful gusts, her mouth a tiny O. The wand is balanced in her soapy fingers, her brow furrowed. Eli bounces a rubber ball patterned with Disney characters, every so often hurling it at his sister and letting it bounce off her head. They're both 5 years old, I would estimate. They have matching dishwater blonde bobs hanging over faint eyebrows and dark eyes. I know all this, but I've never met them, never heard their voices or beheld their sticky cheek smiles. For just a moment, I'm seized by the urge to feel the sunlight from outside warm my face, to step outside my home for the first time in years, to feel UV rays like old times and not feel afraid of what might be in them. But the warmth makes me think of him, tromping around the muddy terrarium of the jungle, slapping aside fronds and feeling sweat drip down his temples. In my dreams, he wears tightly laced and heavy-heeled work boots. Excuse me. His jeans have a hole over his right kneecap, but his white button-up shirt is pristine. In my dreams, a backpack is astride his shoulders, but he doesn't feel burdened by it. He brushes his glasses up his nose, feels the burn of his muscles working to propel him across the village, and he smiles and enjoys the grit of it all. In my dreams, he is never sick. But what good ever came from dreams anyways?
So part of what we want to do here is to cultivate writers who are just starting out, getting published, and part of that is, well, SDSU students. And even though we have kind of pulled away from mostly publishing SDSU students, which we were, 7, 8 years ago, we're still committed to making sure that we do publish students from that community. It's just getting harder and harder to do that. And so what I'd like to do is introduce right now one of our students who is, well, a student and a poet, Caitlin Irish.
All right, hello. So my work is on page 99. I wrote this poem my freshman year. I had been dealing with anxiety that I didn't know what was going on for the longest time. And after feeling stressed out and anxious for so long, I eventually talked to my first college friend about it. And to my surprise, she said I'd been experiencing the same thing. So this poem was written after that experience. It's called Call to Arms. 2 girls sit in a darkened dorm room, words loaded on the tips of their tongues, wanting to pull the triggers. They hesitate a moment, not knowing what the guns are loaded with, not knowing if there will be kickback. The bullets fire from the barrels of their mouths, hitting one another dead on. Relief and understanding take the place of bloodshed, and they let out sighs of repose. They share a nod between themselves as they see they are one and the same. Tears of joy falling, they reload their guns. They do not turn the safety back on.
So you might think that with all this darkness that we're encouraging people to be dark. We don't encourage people to be dark. It's just that the truth is mostly found in dark places. And it's, writers, that's what we do. We dig around, we find the truth. It's not always in the most glamorous place. Our hands hopefully get a little dirty, but then we, polish up what we find and we show it to everybody else. Sue Bassett is our next contributor. And, well, would you just come on up? Thanks. Not a student at SDSU.
Not a student, but one of the people here, so in another college at another time. My work is on page 20. And talking about dark, this poem was never intended to be depressing in any way. So if you read into that, it's something that's really not supposed to be there. It was kind of an interesting time. It was last summer, beautiful day, sitting outside, and my husband had recently retired, and we're just trying to find the new dance in our lives, and we get along fine, love each other. I love him anyway. He's not here. He is listening, I think, though, and are watching. And I was watching the grass, and I can't even remember what happened, what triggered it, but this is what I wrote. Blades of grass. I have decided, after 39 years, that we are not alike. It's pointless and fruitless to compare the microfacets of ourselves with each other. We are two very different people with similar backgrounds, aligned somewhat in our beliefs, but at the core, we remain strangers, confident we know each other because of longevity of relationship and superficial personality traits. It can be said we know each other better than anyone else knows us. But what is that? We live our lives never knowing anyone. We share thoughts, ideas, emotions, bodies, creating beautiful little humans who grow up not knowing us, nor we them. And life goes on. Blades of grass touching in the wind, reaching for the sky, clinging to the earth. The second one is rant poem, and thank you for publishing this with that last line in there, I have to say. Yeah, I had a bad moment here. I was looking up a line from my favorite poet, and I must have hit images, and it came, it was a t-shirt or something. It was just atrocious. They had ruined everything, so I wrote this. I hope I'm never a good enough poet for my poems to be good enough to be analyzed, dissected like laboratory rats for study, parts carved off to be disseminated like relics, making the less whole by giving power to the parts, autopsied for clues by placing interior organs on a scale to be quantified in the present, then thrown in a bag and dispatched to the mortician with the body shell for embalming or burial on a t-shirt or wall decoration, placed under a picture that has no bearing on the poem, no relationship to the words. May God deliver us from the academics. I am one, son.
And for those of you watching and considering punishing me, I'm going to blame the students because they're the ones who picked that poem out. It wasn't me. Speaking of students, we have one of the things we do to commit to helping the next generations of writers, just in any small way we can. We do a prize. It's at this point not a monetary prize, unfortunately, but we do recognize, if you look in the acknowledgements page, and I'll read it out. Anita Sarkis Barr has been a longtime supporter of South Dakota State University's English department, especially Oakwood. Thanks to her contributions, Oakwood will continue to provide an excellent opportunity for young SDSU writers and artists to be involved in the literary arts. We have established an award in her name to recognize excellent emerging writers among the SDSU student body. The 2022 Anita Sarkis Barr Award for Outstanding Contributor is Brina Sturm, who is coming up next.
My poem is on page 23, and it's just kind of about growing older with friends and hanging out with them as you get older and you don't find as much time in your life to be able to do that. So this one is called Lot. Cheese curds devoured by my friend, the vegan, in the dingy diner, frying pan. Couple across complains about the cold, and we laugh along with a strange midnight Midwestern warmth. Sausage patties consumed by my friend, the vegetarian, in a shitty corner booth in frying pan. Outside is an ashtray where my chapped hands reach and pull a dead cigarette into my jean jacket sleeve. In the parking lot, I reveal the apparently not dead smoke. We stare at it still lit, half burned, secondhand. We ask ourselves if the risk was worth it outside frying pan. Standing in that lot, we all took quick drags. 3 friends and a cigarette makes 4 burning fags.
closing off the the live section and launching toward the virtual section is going to be Amber Jensen, who teaches creative nonfiction and other things at SDSU, and also has a book coming out next year, which I don't know, maybe you'll tell us about, maybe not. Come on up, Amber Jensen.
So yes, the essay Homecoming that is here in Oakwood is an excerpt from that book, my manuscript that's going to be out within the next year. And so Finding Shelter will be published by the Millspeak Foundation. So I'm going to jump right into the middle on page 57. This essay is about me waiting for my husband to return from Iraq. At this point, he had been gone for 15 months, during which time our son had been born. So this was about 2 weeks before our son's first birthday, my husband returning from his deployment. When the trio of gleaming black buses pulled into the parking lot, forming a barricade between us and the highway, cheers erupted. The buses with pastel banners painted along their sides looked like the ones I'd ridden when I toured Mexican beaches and mountain villages. Simple charter buses, not the Humvees and artillery trucks I'd envisioned. When a door coughed open and the first uniformed man descended the stairs, expectations scattered, chaos ensued. Families rushed forward, stairs rattled as soldier after soldier stepped down. Each of them looked different. A sharp-chinned teenager, a flat face perforated with narrow eyes, a round face framed by bushy brows. But the same, too, clean-shaven, ears exposed beneath thin-billed camo hats. But none looked like Blake. I panicked. My scanning became frantic. I searched for his familiar plump cheeks cut deep with dimples, his narrow squinting eyes disappearing in a smile. I wondered, had Blake shaved the mustache his buddies goaded him into growing? Had he lost even more weight than when he was home for R&R 8 months earlier? Was everyone off the bus? Why couldn't I find him? My body tingled. I was failing. This was supposed to be the magical part of our story. We should have been drawn together through the crowd like magnets. Something was wrong. Without the sight of Blake to anchor my thoughts, my mind spiraled to the worst possible, least likely conclusion. What if he's not here? A logical impossibility. They hadn't seen combat for weeks. There was demobilization in Kuwait, the checking of inventory, change of command, overseas and cross-country travel. He'd called to tell me when he'd arrive home. There was absolutely no way that Blake wasn't there, but I couldn't find him. Logic gave way to irrational certainty. I reached across my body to hold George steady, pull him closer, my voice quivering. Do you see your daddy? I hunched my neck, lowering my forehead to meet George's, and squinted to feign excitement. He's here somewhere, buddy. Let's go see. I scanned the crowd again. And then, through the flap of flags, glare of sun-off buses, and circles of people holding tight to one another, I caught a glimpse of Blake, all cheeks and wide grin, eyes framed by smile lines, almost within reach. He walked in our direction, infuriatingly patient, as always. I couldn't wait. I wedged my right shoulder between bodies, shielding George from the crowd as I angled my way towards him. I cast my hand up over a barrier of strangers and let it fall, catching the base of Blake's clean-shaven chin. I reeled him in. Bodies pushed and pulled around us, so when the crowd parted slightly, my feet stuttered, and I collapsed into Blake, who steadied me, his hands clasped tightly behind my back, like our first dance, our first kiss under a cottonwood tree. My forehead met his smooth cheek, and I could feel his smile. With George sandwiched in between, our bodies fit together, but Blake pulled back, peering over his wire-rimmed frames at George, presenting a thin finger which George clasped with his chubby hand. Nice to meet you, young man, Blake cooed. George responded with a tired, heat-glazed stare, but he didn't pull away. I rested my head on Blake's shoulder, absorbing the radiance of the moment as he grinned. Yes, it's very nice to meet you.
Well, we don't really have impartial observers, but I do think that if we had impartial observers here, they would say that, you know, Brookings has a little bit going on here. We've got some good writers in this town, and well, I hope that over the years I'm able to make sure that Oakwood continues to celebrate that. Again, we punch above our weight. Here we are, not a very big community, but some pretty good writing here. I hope you'll agree. Now we're going to go. If everyone is here, is Todd Williams here? Are we ready to transition to the virtual? We are going to go as far away from Brookings as maybe you can possibly get. And Todd Williams, who was a recent recipient of the South Dakota State Poetry Society's Chapbook Prize pretty recently, and is now in, I want to say Kuwait, but I think I'm wrong. And he is, well, he's going to tell us where he is. Welcome, Todd Williams.
Right. Good morning. Pretty close, same time zone. I'm here in Tehran, Saudi Arabia. I live in Rapid City, but I'm not there very often. I work here in Saudi Arabia most of the time. And it is 3:37 in the morning here. So I dressed up, but tops only. Today I'll read, I think from the PDF or what I have here, it says pages 6 and 7, maybe. The poem that I'll read today, because it's kind of long, I'll just read one of them. Originally it was called Super Volcano, but the title that it ended up with is Love in the Time of Caldera. When the caldera blows, everything goes with it. There'll be no time to flee by car or bus or plane, no time to gather things we own or need, no time for plans to flee across landscapes reduced to lava, magma unleashed on a world unprepared to deal with the consequence of so much it does not understand. There'll be no red states nor blue states, just a cloud of billowy white turning gray as we choke on a rain of glass, tiny shards piercing soft lungs and steely engines designed to save us from fates born and couched in this technological nirvana. When the caldera blows, we'll become one with the flame. No purpose or blame to differentiate where we stand on the morality of masks, the truth about the election, or the finer points of gender, all arguments rendered moot by the growing roar of the storm, a relentless reckoning filling eyes and ears with singularity and then silence. There will be no time for final requests from the damned, for one last kiss or sad farewells over phones or FaceTime, for told you so's or even oh no's, for reflections on life spent in service or squandered, rent or rude, for the fervent prayer of the faithful, soliloquy or angry remonstration, everything we once were melding with the earth and trees and animals and rivers, all compressed into a fiery mist. There'll be no time to make amends to those we've aggrieved. There'll be no time for forgiveness from those we've deceived. There'll be no time to finally share our darkest secrets, our unrequited loves, our closest held regrets. There'll be no time for anything at all, to make plans, to watch children grow, to make peace with those who look or think or believe differently. There'll be no time to believe in something more than this moment right now, this tiny sliver flowing into a river of wind, earth, and fire. I go to Google in search of solace. What are the odds this year that I win the Powerball? 1 in 292,201,338. that I'm struck by lightning, 1 in 1,222,000, that I see the supervolcano erupt, 1 in 730,000. But seriously, there is so little time. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd, for joining us from all the way across the world. I don't think anyone will blame you if you go back to sleep, but we'd love it if you stick around for a little while. This is going to be the most interesting mailing of contributor copies I've ever done in many, many years as an editor. So thank you. Oh, I forgot something. We have one of our artists here, at least one of our artists, Megan Peterson, who I noticed. I'm like, oh, I have to mention Megan, but then I forgot to mention Megan, and now I'm mentioning Megan. So if you look at the artwork on page 28, Vitamin C, that is by Megan Peterson, who I hope will stand and take a bow. Do we have any other artists here who I've forgotten and may not have known the names of? Okay, wonderful. All right, so moving on to our next, we're going to be still in South Dakota, but our next person is Courtney Hughes-Wyka, who is Black Hills State, I think. Oh, I should look up the bio. Anyway, I saw one of her, we were both in the anthology of South Dakota poetry. These next two poets were people I encountered from the anthology edited by Christine Stewart Nunez a couple years ago. And I saw their work and I said, wow, I've got to get these two people into Oakwood. So Courtney, if you are here, please take it away.
Thank you so much. I just realized that all three poems in the issue are about death. So I will continue our descent into darkness. I'm going to read two poems, one for each of my grandparents, both of whom grew up and lived and died in the Pierre Oneida Agar area. The first is the Museum of Roadside Trash. I pray to my grandmother like others pray to God, because the world is cruel, especially for the littlest souls, the ones littered across highways or caught in the crossfire of busy main streets. Small tragedies unacknowledged as their lives rush through them like water. And so I summon her as I pass each lost squirrel and doe, turtle, feral kitten, and crow, and I imagine her stooped on the shoulder of the road with her plaid shirt rolled to her forearms and her blue polyester pants and moccasins dirty with interstate grime as she lays her palm upon their bellies the way she used to wake me from afternoon naps, until each one is whole and new again and she can lead them home. But sometimes I can't bear to see the wreckage and I summon her magic too early. So instead of a lost creature, I send her blown tires and baseball hats, orphaned shoes and cardboard boxes, broken sticks and fast food cups and discarded t-shirts, and I imagine her in Everwhere, the newest soul at her side, surrounded by those animals and her museum of roadside trash. And I can almost hear her laugh, as electric as a hailstorm. The second poem I am reading is Homecoming. He could still hear the river when the hospice nurse yanked the sheet up and pointed to his legs. You see this modeling here, she said to me, it means he's almost gone. We had moved my grandfather's hospital bed into the den in front of the French doors that looked out onto the water so he could wake with the sun and the Missouri, so we could pretend that this morning was like any other of the last 38 years he'd lived in this house. I wanted to use my words against her, but grief held my tongue. Instead, I gently traced the blue tributaries that had carried the tides of his blood for 93 years and remembered how he used to take me fishing at the water's edge with a stick pole and corn kernels, and all the afternoons we spent in the arcade trying to outsmart the claw machine, our hands sticky with lime sherbet, and the pure joy I felt when I could hear his diesel engine just before he crested the hill on Melton Drive. And how when it was finally time to teach me to drive, we swapped seats in that farm truck on Grey Goose Road, and once I was buckled in, he simply said, "Okay, go ahead, sunshine." I wanted to pull him into the stream of memories, but the only words I could find were, it's okay, go ahead if you need to." I gently tucked the sheets back around his legs, laid my head on his chest like I was 5 again, and listened to his heartbeat until all I could hear was the sound of the waves coming home to shore. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final reader tonight, also virtual, also someone I met through the poetry anthology, South Dakota Poems, is Lisbeth M. Bankert.
Well, I want to thank you, Steve, for the opportunity to participate in this gathering. It's been a really nice opportunity. Thank you. I'm just up in Aberdeen, and this first poem, I suppose you could call it a regional poem, because I moved here from Pennsylvania, where roads actually curve and there are mountains. And I'm still 25 years later not used to how flat it is. So it's an actual fact that, yes, the overpass in Aberdeen is the highest point in town. So over the rainbow. It's the highest point in town, the overpass, though it's not really a bridge, not a link connecting a high place to another high place. Not a joining together of two things otherwise kept apart. No, it starts out low and flat and crawls up 22 feet. I know, right? Staggering. Over the rail yard and slopes back down to the low and flat once more, making its own molehill. For what else could it be in this flat land? Not a mountain, that's for sure. And what does it connect but a piece of road to another piece of road that you could pretty easily get to without a bridge, really, unless a train rolls through. And even then, you would only have to wait 15 goddamn minutes for the train to move out of the way. Damn it. So they built a bridge, and there it is, the highest point in town. And you can't even ride a sled down it in the winter. And then my second poem is an ode to my morning walks, I guess. The moon sees me. The white flag of Oreo's tail glows like a beacon as we walk our circle around the neighborhood. I've timed it right. The buzzing street lamp, the dog's black nails clicking against the asphalt, and the TV tube cords of my tinnitus bounce against the bone white moon. We're in between. Half nullifying melodies and 2/3 implasticity, pulling together dreamscape theologies and pre-dawn potential. Why do I not wear hiking boots? What did I do with Peterson's field guide? Surely I need something to make sense of the flashlight, the house key, and the Kleenex in my pockets. When we turn the corner, the moon shines bright enough to cast shadows low under the trees. She pursues us past the 2 startled oak trees and the fire hydrant. She makes soft edges turn sharp. She's serious. She doesn't fuck about with indeterminate numbers. She wants pure integers because she rounds things up. When we end where we began, I get my poop in a group and into the trash. The dog and the rearranged fractals in my head go into the house. The moon stays outside. Tomorrow, it's fractions. I'll need to pay attention.
Well, thank you, everybody. Readers, guests, and this is what we have for the reading. And I'm hoping that we will stick around, that you will stick around, and, well, build some literary community here. Oh. Wait, thank you, Humanities Council? Okay. Oh. Oh, yes. And thank you. Sorry, I didn't think about that. And thank you also to Emlyn Weber and Scott Cowan for making this happen, and Michelle Christian and everyone else here, Dean Sargent, helping make this possible. Now I suggest that we, well, build some literary community. And remember that the South Dakota Festival of Books is going to be in Brookings in not that many months. So, Dr. McEntee, what? And take a copy. I was going to get there. Take a copy of Oakwood. It is free. And we plan to keep it free so that we can just sort of spread it around as much as possible. It will also be available for those of you, for instance, who are contributors who want to share with people who are really far away, like Saudi Arabia, or somewhere else. After about a month or so, we will be putting this online. The library has archived the entire history of Oakwood back to 1975, and we're going to continue that. So it'll be available to everyone worldwide and free. So thank you so much. Those of you who haven't, contributors from far away, if you haven't seen, it looks really good. It's a beautiful issue. So thank you so much for coming. Enjoy some refreshments and free magazine. Thank you so much.